Hello, everybody. Welcome back to another podcast. Thank you again for tuning in to another episode. If you haven't done so yet, please go leave us a review on iTunes. It really does make a big difference for our podcast, and we really appreciate the support. Also, if you didn't know, we just got a LinkedIn page called Flipping the Barrel Podcast. Make sure you give us a follow to stay up to date with, everything that we're doing, the events that we're going to, and who our upcoming guests are. So yeah, anyways, let's get into today's episode.
Today, we'll be interviewing Bill Henn. He has 25 years of experience in oil and gas. He's currently the Executive Vice President of Business Development at Canyon Oak Energy. Prior to joining Canyon Oak Energy, Mr. Henn was an Account Vice President at Halliburton, where he was responsible for developing and growing the global accounts of multiple major North American independent oil and gas companies. He also is the founding member of a Women's Sharing Excellence program at Halliburton. Ben, thank you so much for coming on today. Bill.
Good morning.
I'm sorry. I don't know why I said Ben.
That's not the first time anybody called me Ben. I answered every name. Bill, Bob.
Yeah.
Just let it go and I'll answer.
Hey, it started with a B and I was like, yeah.
Yeah, that's no worries. Well, welcome. I'm excited to be here today.
All right. Well, let's get right into it. Tell us a little bit about your background. Where did you grow up? What was life like as Bill?
That's interesting. I grew up in a small town in Kansas. It's a little town called El Dorado. I'm one of 6 kids in my family, so I'm next to the youngest. My dad was second generation oil and gas, and I'm third generation oil and gas now. But I grew up on a farm, and so really I didn't know my dad until I was able and old enough to work out on the farm with him. When I was about 8 years old. So my dad would go to work at the oil company, City Service at the time, and would then pick us up in the evenings and go out to the farm and work, or on the weekends we'd get to work with him. So it was all about family and God and work is the whole strategies growing up. We had a really good childhood with all my 5 brothers and sisters.
Wow. Well, I know you mentioned that you were a third generation in oil and gas.
Yes.
So where did that stem from? Who was the first generation and to where you are today?
My mother's dad I think he was with Humble Oil. And so they actually he was a pumper. And my mom lived actually on the lease that he pumped. And the oil company owned the house that they lived in. So that was part of the pay that he got, was living on the lease. So when you look at history, that's where things came from. So, and then my dad ended up getting in the oil and gas industry as well.
Did you ever think about not being in the field since your whole life, your parents and your grandparents were in it?
I thought about it actually. I wanted to actually do things in oil and gas that helped me get through college. I worked summers. But when I got out in '88 from Kansas State University, there weren't any jobs. We were experiencing another downturn. And so I was planning on being an air conditioning, heating, and repairman. So yeah, something totally different than oil and gas. You just never know what your future is going to hold for you.
Wow. So we know you studied engineering. What made you go into that?
Well, I started first 2 year. I went to a junior college, Butler County Community College first, and studied computer science. And so I have a 2-year degree in computer science. But once I saw what they were doing, sitting behind a desk programming and learning to do that, I couldn't do that. Like I said, I grew up on a farm. I was outside 90% of the time. I love the outdoors, and I just couldn't see myself as sitting behind a desk and doing that the rest of my life. So when I went to Kansas State, I looked at all the different disciplines there and thought engineering sounded like fun, and decided to do engineering technology at Kansas State, and spent three more years in college and finally got out with a BS degree in engineering technology. So really, I wasn't even planning it. I just liked the guidance counselors, and I liked the professors that I met. So that was the changing point, to change degrees.
That's awesome. And then we heard right when you graduated, your first job was a field engineer. Can you tell us a little bit about that job? And I think it goes hand in hand because you did like being outdoors and, like labor work. So tell us a little bit about that first job.
Exactly. So I got out of university and moved to Houston without a job. It was, like I say, in '88, there weren't a lot of opportunities. So I came down to Houston and just moved to look for opportunities. And I had a cousin that actually worked for Bayroit Corporation, and she introduced me to an engine or a company called NL Industries that were hiring. And so I went and interviewed. Next thing I know, that afternoon they called and said, "Can you start tomorrow?" And so the training program was pretty interesting. I said no. I said, "Give me five days. I need to move my couch down." So got a U-Haul, moved to Houston, and then they went and bought me a pair of boots and said, "Pack your bags. You're going offshore." And so I'd never seen a body of water bigger than a lake. And so that first job was very interesting because training back then was very simple. We're going to try you out for 2 weeks and see if you can last. If you can last, then you're going to be a good engineer. And so that's what happened. They sent me offshore, and I actually quit the first day because it was a 15-hour boat ride, and I was seasick for 15 hours. And
I
so
would have quit too.
Yeah.
it was the worst. I mean, the guys that I hired on with, they said, "Oh, you're riding a boat maybe 10% of the time. The rest you're flying helicopters." Well, I did 90% riding boats and 10% riding helicopters my first 3 years. So it was definitely a challenging experience. But that company man, he was pretty good to me. He just said, "Son, take a look at that helideck. Do you think any helicopters landed here in the last 10 years?" And it was fully stacked with boxes and offshore baskets. And like I said, a helicopter hadn't landed there in 10 years. So I just waited till it got nice and calm and ended up riding the boat back.
Wow. So was that when you were doing the 60-30 rotations, or was that when you were international is when you started the 60-30 rotations?
That was when I started international work. So I started a 60-30 rotation, and that by far was very challenging as well because being a farm kid from Kansas, I had never really been outside the United States, so I had to get a passport. And next thing I know, I'm headed off overseas, and half the time I couldn't spell the country I was going to. So
How was that balance with, family? And like, I'm assuming, how old were you around that time? Probably like mid-20s?
I was mid-20s, but that was the nice part is I really didn't have a family at the time when I was working at 60-30, but I had a girlfriend and who's now my wife. But that was the whole thing is she said, I'll marry you one of these days, but I sure as heck ain't going to do it while you're doing the 60-30 rotation. So,
That's
what's your advice to those that have to do that sort of rotation on managing that? Because that's got to be difficult.
It's extremely difficult. I mean, you have to have the relationship. Your relationship has to be strong. I think that's the best advice. You have to communicate, but you just got to build the trust amongst your family, your spouse, your girlfriend, whatever. That's what it's about. It's about that trust is the foundation, and you just got to treat people the way you want to be treated. I mean, that's what it is. I have a very strong family, a very strong wife, a very strong son. And, those are things that we learned during that time. I mean, you have to understand who's boss. And when it comes to the house, who's ever at the house the longest is the boss. And that was my wife.
Yeah.
And you have to learn to live with her. And she has to learn to live with you. But it's really, they're the ones that control the house and whoever it is that's staying at home. And it took me a while to figure that out, but I had a long career of traveling overseas for many, many years, over 15 years, 3 weeks a month. So yeah, you've got to learn and communicate. That's the biggest thing. And I learned communication is key in everything we do.
Wow. Yeah. Yeah. I think that's what's difficult because if you do want to keep moving up in a lot of companies, like you need to be that person. You have that challenging job. And that's why you keep climbing up the ladders because you're always sacrificing. You're the ones that's running around versus the more comfortable life of just, I'm just going to stay in Houston and, so yeah, I mean, kudos to you. And I know with a lot of people that we've had on here, it's all about that relationship. You need a partner that's there to support you. That's not there to, oh, you got to leave again. And because then it's negative towards you. And then every time you're leaving, you don't feel good about it too. So
that's correct. And that's the challenge with it is it gets back to that communication, and you all have to just be together all the time. I mean, it's when I mean be together, you have to be on the same page. And, with how you discipline, how you do anything, and you can't miss any important engagements. I don't care what it is, how important it is. You need to be there as a family, and work will still be there. It'll still be there tomorrow, and those customers will still be there tomorrow. I mean, that's the tough part. It's how do you bridge the gap between both, but also provide a living for your family?
Yeah. And I mean, like we've seen kind of, you started in the field from right out of school, and you made your way up the ladder to become, we heard you became head of the sales team globally for Halliburton at the time. What do you think contributed to all of this success, right? Because when you look at successful people over the last, let's say 10 years of their career or 20, what do you think was why you kept succeeding? If you had to name something.
I would say you're always pushing yourself to do something more than something out of your comfort zone. I think that was the key. I mean, I was the global BD and marketing manager for Sperry Drilling Services. So my goal when I started as a junior field engineer was to be in the corner office one of these days. I never did get there. I got next to it. So, I thought I did pretty well, but
oh yeah, that's pretty good.
Yeah, I would say so.
You just don't know where, how you got there, because the company will make choices for you, and you need to be willing to listen and take those opportunities and challenge yourself. But then again, there's some opportunities that you just say, no, I need to pass on. And now, will it hurt your career? Depends on your manager at the time or your boss. But I looked at them as all opportunities. I mean, we moved from Houston to Dallas. I was in Dallas as a sales rep, then moved to New Orleans as sales manager. That was my first big management job, very young, way more than what I really needed to do, but the company saw something in me, and they challenged me to do that. Then I left Sperry, went to work for Bayroit Drilling Fluids. And then the opportunity came up when Halliburton bought the dresser companies. There were 6 of us that moved into the Halliburton organization. And that's when I got my first taste at global account management. But that was a choice that the company made for me. They wanted me to move into that role. I had no idea what a global account manager was or how impactful it could be. That's really where I learned business development. I mean, the other ones were sales. But there's a big difference between sales and business development. And that was the key that I think Halliburton has over a lot of the companies out there today, is they understand business development, and they put a good strategy around business development. So I think that's the key, is just learning how to move with companies and be willing to relocate if possible. This new shale revolution, really, you're changing companies, but you're really not changing what you're doing. Same process over and over, from a service company perspective, even from an operator's perspective. But there is a lot of technology in there, and you just got to be willing to adapt it and learn more. But you're always pushing yourself in order to gain more knowledge and learn something new every day.
Wow.
I think that really says a lot about, not just the company, but you being able to accept those positions and move into them and to give it your all. To be a global account manager is something that I've always loved that position. When I was at Schlumberger, I know they had something similar. Can you explain what that actually entails, being a global account manager?
A lot of
in
late
a nutshell
nights and early mornings. I think, Jamie, you're exactly right. I think the big major service companies understand the concept of account management, but at Halliburton it was a little different because the operations actually worked with the account management team. So the account management team actually, as a global account manager, I had all sales, any of the product lines, and even some of the operations that worked with my customers, they reported up through me. And so the sales organization inside Halliburton led a lot of the execution operations as well. So the operations teams had the responsibility and accountability for it, but the actual delivery of the service at that customer's was on my remit as well. So I had daily reports. I looked at everything from across my accounts globally. And I traveled all over the world to meet with not only the operations team of Halliburton, but also the customer too. 99% of the job was communication, and communicating both ways across accounts as well as operations in your own company.
Yeah, I mean, when I was looking at your resume and some stuff that you sent, you're responsible for growth upwards of $1 billion, which absolutely just shocked me when I saw it as a salesperson. How did you manage such a large scale of growth and maintain it? I mean, I could only fathom what that would be like. I mean, the amount of products and services that you were providing to reach that amount had to have been massive.
It was. I mean, you looked at every product line that Halliburton had. I mean, it was at the time, it was 13 different product lines and like 38 sub-product lines. And so as part of the knowledge that we had as global account manager, you had to meet every one of those product lines. You need to understand all the technologies behind those, where the applications were. But more importantly, you had to understand your client better than the client understood themselves.
Mm-hmm.
So most of your engineers, most of your people are so discipline focused in an operator. They know exactly what they're doing there, but a lot of the times they don't know exactly what's happening on other areas and other parts of their organization. And we did. We planned. We met with those companies. We met with the senior leaders. We knew where they were spending their budgets, why they were spending their budgets there, and which product lines that Halliburton may not have had, in those areas. And so then we had to negotiate internally at Halliburton to say, we need to get this product line into this region or this country. And that's what we did. So it's the planning that went into it was more than a weekend, trying to plan an account plan. We took months at it. Maybe we started in July for the next year, planning for growth for the next year. So, I mean, that was how strategic all these companies are at the account level. And I know Schlumberger was like that too. I've got a lot of friends that were account managers. We got along extremely well. We all understood there's enough to go around, but yet we were still competing with each other. But hey, that's fine. The oil field's big.
Yeah.
Not now, but it is.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's gaining a little strength, though, it looks like.
Oh, yeah. Well, what's nice about with your background is you've had, over 30 years of experience. What would you say was one of the reasons why you decided to be a founding member of the Women's Sharing Excellence program at Halliburton? And mainly, why did you get involved? Because I think it's awesome. I love when males do get involved because, we've always said, both parties need to be there to make a change and, include more of diversity into it. But it's always probably very challenging to step up to the plate. So, what made you do that?
I spent a couple years at Kellogg Brown and Root. And so I was the head of vice president of business development for their operations and maintenance division. And I saw at that point in time in the engineering, construction, or maintenance group that there weren't a lot of women at all in that side of the business. And it was a very stoic type of organization at the time. And Randy Harrell, who was the president at the time, saw that, and he was making changes internally as well. I was watching that. And then when I came back to head up the business development group after I left KBR and came back into the Halliburton proper, Sperry was a unique organization. It was a very close-knit team, and we saw a lot of women in the organization that were doing a lot of good things, but the rest of the Halliburton organization wasn't. And then when I became a global account manager, we started seeing, I got to meet a lot more individuals in the organization, a lot of women around the globe. And one of the key individuals that I saw was a young lady out of Russia. And she was just one of those sharp individuals, spoke 7 different languages.
Wow.
Was just on the ball all the time. And I happened to meet her. And so I took a risk and moved her to Houston to be part of my global business development organization in marketing. And I saw what she could do, and I said, well, if she's one of the 30,000 employees here, where are the rest of them?
Mm.
And let's start working. And so I got to meet a lot of people, and there were 5 young ladies at Halliburton at the time that I built some good relationships with. And they said, hey, we're going to build this Women Sharing Excellence program, and we would like for you to be part of the board. And then at the same time, we're going to have our CFO as part of the board, and 2 or 3 other individuals as part of the board. So there were 3 men and 3 women, senior leaders, that were part of the board, and I was part of that. And it took off. It took off with a vengeance, and every month there were monthly meetings, doing webinars just like you're doing here.
Mm.
But it was really one of those, we started to see a transition into Halliburton across the globe. And now you're seeing a lot of people inside of Halliburton that are ladies moving up into the senior ranks, which is excellent. I think it's having a diverse background in your management team and all the people that you can know. I mean, that's what makes companies great.
What do you think made it work for Halliburton? What do you think made this this Sharing Excellence program work? Because I know a lot of companies try and fail at it. What do you think made it different?
I think having the board that you had that were of senior leadership that was fully behind it, they actually gave them a budget as well, monthly budget, capitals to spend to make things work. And I think it strives from the leadership team. So the leadership team has to back it. It can't just be like a after school sport.
Yeah.
It can't be. It has to be part of your DNA. And I think a lot of organizations, it has to be led a little bit through your HR group. Although HR is good and bad, but they can be extremely good if they focus on the employees' well-being and growth of the company. Mm-hmm. That's the whole focus, instead of a cost center. Mm-hmm. If you have an HR organization that's cost center, it's not going to work very well.
And I think what's important with these organizations, and like you said, women are moving up more and more into all these bigger organizations. It's for Jamie and I, it's like we want to see that, because that really gives us like confidence that, our careers are valued just as much. And like when you do see a board of like leaders and it is diverse, it just makes you feel like you're included as well, because there's someone representing you, versus, well, it's just like 10 guys and that's it. Right. And they all look the same.
Yeah.
They all look like
that's really nice.
Guys, white beards like me. I'm getting old. We don't need to have all of us old guys out there anymore.
That's awesome. Well, with the successful career that you had at Halliburton, what made you retire after 26 years and go straight into a startup?
I think it really revolved around, my whole career was pretty much like a startup. In order to be successful inside of a large organization like that, you had to think differently. You had to be an entrepreneur and to make things happen. And so I think it was one of those in late 2014. I just decided that it was time for me to hang up my boots at Halliburton and try something different. I had met my other team members at Canyon Oak in years past. I mean, one of my other guys I met at Shell, we met him in Brunei, and we kept a relationship for over 20 years. Mm-hmm. And so it really was one of those opportunities to bring new technology to the market. And I saw that my career was probably not going to be to head up the business development organization at Halliburton. There were other individuals that they thought would be more positioned for that, since they had worked international. They had lived international, not just worked, but they had lived international. And so they were looking at other alternatives, other individuals. So I felt it was a great opportunity for me to leave the company, and still got great relationships over there with a lot of the key leadership team. And it was just one of those opportunities for me and my wife to do something different and get back to what we loved. And, so it's like I say, it was just one of those hard decisions to make, but I don't regret it. I don't look back. It was the right decision at the time.
Yeah, no, we've experienced that with a lot of people that have come on the podcast, have spent 20, 30 years at a major organization, and they use all the knowledge and the expertise from being in that organization to move and do something on their own. And it's just amazing what you're able to accomplish and what these companies are able to help you grow within them and provide the detail and the information that you need in order to feel confident and to go and start something up.
Yep, you're exactly right. I think working for a service company, a large service company, you get a lot of training.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's the most valuable component that they provide. And you, as like you say, in your companies, if they offer training, take it. Do as much as you can, reach out. I think there's a lot of good speaking training schools. I mean, I took a course in Atlanta, Georgia. That was called Speakeasy. By far changed my life on how you present, how you think about presentations, how you present yourself as well. That's a key that companies, they make a decision. As soon as you walk in that door, 5 minutes later, they either like you or they don't like you. And I think you're going to see that here as this market turns around. The sales organizations in every one of these companies have been decimated. And you don't have professional salespeople out there now. There are a lot, but a lot of them have been let go. And so a lot of these companies will have to be retooled and to bring sales back in. And with all the social media and all the things that are out there today, you're going to be trying to reach out and use every tool that you have to capture that relationship with your clients. And it's not just, like you say, it's not just learning from a school or training. It's every one of those experiences that you've had over the course of your career is going to make you a better person in how you work in this industry.
Gotcha. Yeah, no, and one thing that I really like that you said is about I was an entrepreneur within the company. Like that sentence really does speak, because I think sometimes people who are in organizations think, oh, I want to be an entrepreneur, I should just quit and like start my own thing and all this stuff. But they don't realize that you could be an entrepreneur within your organization. Just because you work for a large corporation doesn't mean you're not an entrepreneur. And I've always noticed that the people who are succeeding, it's because they have an entrepreneur-like mind. They're challenging, they're saying, let's do things differently, and they're treating their business as if it was their own. And that's why they're successful.
No, I think you're exactly right. I mean, if you really are an entrepreneur and you understand the value of your net worth and how you move forward in the organization or inside your own personal life, you can make that transition. Make sure you have a safety net behind you, and that safety net better be 5 to 6 years worth of salary or whatever saved up in order to do an entrepreneurial opportunity, because they're not easy. Not everybody can do it. You better have a strong, like you say, your relationship with your spouse has to be strong, because entrepreneurship and trying to raise capital in a market like this is not easy. It's extremely difficult. So, I mean, it's a challenge. So that entrepreneurship inside your own internal company is a great way to start and moving in that fashion.
I couldn't agree with you more, Bill. And, I think that segues right into our last question here, which is, with the impacts of COVID, how do you see oil and gas moving forward in this new normal?
Ooh, that's a big one. It's a challenge. I mean, I think everything is changed. Like I say, I've seen in my career over 30 years, I've seen 6 or 7 downturns. I've seen a lot of good people let go. The graying of the workforce is always going to continue to gray. It doesn't matter. But I think this one is totally different. It's how you reach out and connect with companies between the service industry and the operators. The biggest challenge you'll see here is how you make the growth come alive faster than we did in the past. And that's the challenge that you're going to see, because like I said, the service industry has been decimated, and the ones that do 80% of the work in the field level, they're not there. And so the training, the digitalization of oil field is on its way. That's going to help. It's going to come full circle to where I think the skill sets will be a little different, but yet you still need the individuals to go out into the fields to drill the wells, to log the wells, cement the wells, complete the wells, produce the wells, and then, keep the ongoing operations going. So, but I do believe there's going to be a major consolidation in the service industry, but you're still going to have a lot of these small service providers out there, because there are a lot of them that were smart in this downturn. They protected their balance sheet, and they're going to be okay. They will come back and pick up with the customers that they had. Now, there's a lot less customer base that'll be around, but you will still have a very large organization, in the service industry. It'll still be around, but it's just going to take a little bit longer to ramp up, is the way I see it.
Wow. Well, thank you so much for coming on the podcast. You've shared so much wealth and knowledge of, the last 30 years of your oil field career. And this is exactly what this podcast is about. So I love learning about people's careers, and the fact that you started as a field engineer offshore, wanted to quit on your first day.
Yep.
So many challenges of moving around the world and traveling 60, 30 days, being away from home. And then you mentioned you were leaving every 3 weeks, almost monthly international, all of that hard work to become where you are today. So thank you so much for sharing that. And it really inspires, the little people like us.
There are no little people. I think that's the key is everybody puts their pants on one leg at a time. And, my dad always said, treat people the same way you want to be treated. And I've always tried to live that method, and it's always got me to different places. And so, it's the upbringing and I like what you two ladies have done. You are changing the narrative, and keep it up, because it's people like you that will make the next great company out there. And it's to be part of those organizations. Just being associated with you, I think says a lot, and you're opening eyes to a lot of different individuals. And so keep it up. We really appreciate it.
Thank you. Thanks, Bill.
That.
We really appreciate it. And thank you for your time this morning. And we look forward to discussing again with you. And thank you again for coming on.
You bet. Thank you all very much. Take care.
Bye.